what is being shown at this point in the channel 16, 18 slots?
Nothing. They're gone. Those channels are gone. You can't even tune them in.
So they're just not.
There's just nothing there.
Well, somebody suggested that they thought they were putting in some more of those channels where you shop or something, but I thought, no, I didn't think they were going to do that.
About a week or so ago, I tried tuning in all three of the 14, 16, and 18, and they were all, you won't even tune them in.
Right.
So they don't even, they just don't exist anymore.
Don't exist. Have you had calls from people who weren't able to get it and so forth? Have you had any calls from people that are mentioned?
If I recall, the last actual call we got from city administration got regarding anything to do with the channel migration and the digital converter box or anything like that was handled satisfactorily for that individual. I also would like to express that while we weren't completely supportive of migrating the channels, as the process has gone forward, Cox Communications has been very responsive to any issues. There have been some issues. We've gotten some complaints. We've gotten some complaints that ranged everywhere from, I went down to the Cox store to get my converter box and they had no idea what I was talking about, to I called the toll-free number to get some information and they told me that I was going to have to pay for it. Every single call that we have received, or email that we have received, or letter that we have received at the city administration regarding any issue of that type, we've immediately contacted the Public Affairs Office of Cox Communication, who immediately went forward and identified who the people were responsible, where and how they may have gotten their false information, corrected it, and took care of the person who was having the issue directly. And we have also, of most of the complaints that we originally got, we have gotten follow-up from those people saying, thank you, Cox took care of the situation admirably, and we're satisfied.
And in the discussion and working with them to get the child programming lineup stuff, if they're able to show up on a digital box, I don't know if it's possible or not. They don't have immediate plans for those channels. Maybe it's possible to work with them where we were able to maybe even just say on those three channels has been moved to.
On 14, 16, and 18,
yes,
we did that for 60 days. And at that time, understand that the reason that the access channels were migrated in the first place was to free up bandwidth on the system.
sure.
And for an analog channel, one analog channel equals about 10 digital channels.
Well, just to be clear, not necessarily the channel itself, but on the guide. Maybe we're working with them to see if we can get the information.
I don't believe those channels even show up on the guide.
Okay.
I'll double check that.
Gotcha.
To make
That's
sure.
my suggestion on the guide itself. If there's something, if they are there, disable it.
If they have that capability, if they're there and they have that capability, I'll follow up with them and see if we can't do that.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, they do print the guide, which you can get, but I guess you have to always go get it. I don't think they mail them out to people. Is that right?
The channel,
The one that Cox prints on
the
there.
channel lineup, they will send one of those every time they make a channel change to subscribers. I know I received one when this channel change happened. I received a new printed guide.
Right. And I think they maybe actually create one per month.
As far as I know, they only print a new one anytime they change the channel lineup itself, because obviously it's a very expensive proposition to print those new ones.
But I didn't know if they did come on mail. I never received one of them. All right. Education channel report. Didn't get anybody. Didn't get a hold of anybody.
Right now we
We're
are
hoping to hear. What have you heard?
we're still in the process of working on draft agreement with Fayetteville Public Schools. Fayetteville Public Schools, in the interim, has taken over the education channel. They're telecasting programming 24/7 on the education channel, which is channel 217. on Cox Communications, still in the Channel 99 menu on AT&T. So that's still in process to finalize the agreement. Again, it's going to be an agreement that just essentially says, they're going to do it, city administration is going to let them do it, and you as a board will have a copy of the proposed agreement well in advance of it being considered by the city council or the school board. So you'll have an opportunity to review it and provide whatever input you would like to provide to the city council when they consider it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I would like to invite new members. We only have one. To join the Internet Subcommittee. Who else here is participating in the Internet Subcommittee? You did one or twice.
Yeah, Mr. Ted, I believe was the chair of that subcommittee. Mr. Marvin Cook is part of that as well.
They're not willing to now, so
Along with us, so.
we've got, look, 1, 2, 3, that makes a committee. Anybody willing to volunteer?
I definitely want to continue to look at it. Absolutely.
I've actually got another issue I'm going to be looking into franchise fees. So I would refer to somebody else on the internet subcommittee for now.
Okay.
When are we currently meeting?
Well, it has not met since September or some
October.
and we would want probably 3 people get together and choose one of you to be the chair. And actually, go forward with that. If you use the internet, and if you're interested in the internet, that helps. If you're an expert on it, that's even better, but you don't have to be. So,
I bet you can sign Mr. Spencer up for that.
okay, you know Mr. Spencer.
I do.
Well,
He's an IT person.
Well,
For us.
maybe we'll nominate him.
I'm not-
Let him know.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and nominate him for that.
All in favor? Okay. All right, well, at least if you and you will get Mr. Spencer on board.
I think we can do that.
Sure, then maybe next month we'll have that committee functioning again. Thank you. Now we're ready for the compliments, complaints.
I believe we were going to discuss the meeting.
Meeting location, yes. Okay.
Okay, so the city council and the planning commission are the other two bodies that meet in this room.
Yes, and I don't know how many years that's gone on, probably more than a decade, or whatever, things change, I don't know what to call it back then.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just think with 7 people sitting in a big room like this, it doesn't really foster good discussion with the public. I mean, we can sit here and talk to each other, but when you gotta get Mr. Giesler and Ms. Shelley and Mr. Davis to stand up at the podium and address us so formally, I don't think that's dealing with the public like we ought to.
well, if you watch a lot of these meetings, you notice that we do now have a camera up here. In the past, you'd have a camera on the side trying to get the face of the person speaking.
You understand what you're talking about, having something maybe, lack of a better term, more intimate, something that's more conversational
Absolutely.
rather than, so.
Because almost all the other boards and commissions meet in room 326. It's a smaller space, it's better for discussion with anybody that actually comes into the meeting.
But once again, we still don't have cameras that can pick up the speaker in those other rooms. And,
Have there been any issues with that as far as complaints from the public to the government channel on televised meetings with the boards that meet in that room?
No, sir. I would tell you that based on what you're saying, I've been told that's the primary reason that the city council holds its agenda sessions in room 326, because they felt that it engendered more discussion because of the format of the room and the tables being in a rectangular pattern, that they felt that it actually did engender more conversational give and take regarding the agenda items amongst the participants, and therefore that's why they have their agenda sessions in that room. However, the legislative session is in this room because of the more formal aspect of it.
Absolutely. Does it create any kind of issue from the broadcast side to televise these from there? I would assume being the agenda session's done, there's no problems with broadcasting.
Now, we actually record several meetings, as Mr. Pennington said. A lot of boards and commissions meet in 326. The other meeting room that is available to schedule for that is room 111, which is on the first floor. And it also has, its tables are in rectangular format like 326. And we have not received any complaints from anybody regarding how we record those meetings in there, which we do with one camera in one end of the room. And we try to do that as effectively as possible.
But there is this complaint, if you don't hear all of them, but oftentimes you cannot hear the speaker whose back of the head is being shown while he's presenting to the whatever panel is there.
Correct. If I'm wrong, but I think what your suggestion is that when we have the speakers, that they would be seated as well in the room, or are you suggesting that they'd be presenting?
I think that'd be fine if we can have them seated at the table with us.
I think that would be okay as well.
I don't know how we would configure that. That's a logistics issue if we looked at it.
I would say that the matter of having that speaker space equals everybody else's, so that when that person's up there speaking, a person that represents the public or a staff member making a presentation or whatever it is, that we've now got this wonderful backup camera here. And that makes, in making television, as we say, we want to hear every word clearly. We don't want anybody speaking the way that we can't hear. There have been a lot of things run on Government Channel with the audio just, sometimes we don't even have a face. The camera person sometimes does not go over there and get that person to speak face, even if they're in a position that can't see their face. And it takes a little time to do it. This is a great system. This is a wonderful thing that you can snap right to it. It's all done.
Your suggestion is to make the meeting more conversational, I think a little more warm rather than a more formal environment. The speakers or members of the public would join us in sitting at these tables.
That would be cool.
And board members would be denoted by their name plaque or whatnot. That would show the separation, if you will.
Just from a psychological standpoint, I'd like to sit down at the table with somebody, and I mean, if Mr. Davis has some complaints he wants to bring to us, I want to look him in the eye and not from 30 feet away, and so we can talk about it.
Sure, I do understand that.
Is there a conflict with those rooms at the time that we meet?
At this point in time, the meeting rooms in City Hall are scheduled through City Clerk Saunders Smith. So if the board decided that you wanted to meet in a different room, you would have to contact, or I would contact the city clerk and find out what room is available at what times. Is one of those rooms available on the third Thursday at 5:30? I don't know. That's not something that I'm aware of because I don't pay attention to the actual room schedule. I do pay attention to when this meeting is, but so I can't answer that question. I can tell you that whatever the board may decide, we will consult with you on how to actually configure and conduct the meeting so it is the most effective possible, both from the live meeting perspective of what happens in the room and also from the viewer's perspective of what they will see and hear on the government channel.
Can we give it a trial run?
Well, we've had committee meetings in there, and you can watch some of those. In fact, that's one on that video.
I mean, I've seen, like Aubrey was saying, I've seen a lot of committee meetings, and from a viewer's perspective, on television, it doesn't seem as viewer-friendly. In 326 anyway, I don't recall any in 111, but
chairs right down here close and,
Yeah.
and interacted that way. That's before we had this camera.
One of the things that
So, already.
like I said, if this would help you consider this situation, let's just take room 326, for example. We've all seen an agenda session that occurs in there. Traditionally, we know where the mayor sits. He sits at that one end of that square table, city council members in their respective places, city attorney, city clerk, where they are. What does that leave? That leaves the one place where the person who's presenting to this group has their back to the camera. Well, there are 7 members of the telecommunications board. You have 1 staff member that is your support, that's me. So we're looking at fewer people. My suggestion would be that we put the chair on that end of that table where the mayor sits. And we also, at that point in time, we have anybody who's going to be making a presentation to the board and subsequently the viewers to be at that same end. So they're facing the camera and they have a microphone available to them to speak. And they go into that. I'm sorry?
That's what I would have understood it would be from what you suggested, Mr. Baker. That's what I would have envisioned.
And that's how I would conduct the meeting. And rather than having that individual who would be presenting me, Ms. Shelley, Mr. Bemis, whomever who may be going in there, sitting with their back to the camera, I would say, let's turn that around. Still have the chair at that end facing the camera, the members of the board and other participants on the sides, and anybody who's doing the presentation to go to the same end where the chair is and be able to present to the board and the camera that's there as well.
Well, after you came on board to work here in the, spring '09? I don't remember.
April of 09 is
April
April
of
of
09.
09.
Well, first meeting, I immediately suggested we do what we had done in past years before I got on the board 2.5 years ago. Mr. Hilton, when he was station manager and administrator for the government channel, sat over here, and the communication director sat over here on this side. So they were all on the table, on this table, with mics, and didn't have to get up to speak. Public had to come to speak. And if the city attorney came to advise us on something, he sat up there in his usual seat. When anybody's had meeting, either council or planning commission, anybody, there's somebody there. But we haven't had that, all that staff support. In fact, we had a gap before you were hired that year, 09. So, and then Mrs. Smith came on in what? August that year. So, and she's attended all of it, although not. Well, we haven't had many meetings lately, so I don't know. We can't
Whatever
tell
the
you
board
what-
decides, we will make it work for you. That's what we're here to do.
So I'd kind of like to give it a try.
We want to propose it to try.
But we could have a committee meeting so you can have the experience.
I'd move that we have next month's meeting in room 326 if it's available to the city clerk's office. And to have it configured in the way that Mr. Geisler had said.
I'll second that. I think that would create a better environment.
Okay, I will discuss this a little further, and others may also, before I ask for call back for a vote with only 4 people. Once again, we haven't had a 5-person vote in 6 months or so. The clerk's office has a schedule in most Thursday nights. In fact, Council of Neighborhoods was meeting upstairs on the 3rd Thursday and actually moved it to get away from our meeting and some others that were trying to get it on Thursdays. So the Partners Board has been meeting on Thursdays, and some Thursdays there's just a whole wrapped up. You have to go through the schedule, but schedules.
I'll try to talk about option next month, make that decision.
Yeah, I
Second
think
already, but.
Flash, just like we would ask her to swap somebody else's meeting.
I think you're saying just assuming
Only
there's
if
no, only
it's
if
available.
Right.
Yeah, if 326 is available, I think we ought to try. If we work with the city clerk on that.
Okay, well,
actually several to address.
No, I'm sorry, I'm making a complaint. Do I get to make the complaint?
Well, I have several other complaints to address.
Well, am I the only, you're the...
No, you're not the only complaint.
But I'm waiting 2 hours and you've talked an hour and a half, please. I'm
Wait a minute.
take one.
Please come to the podium and address it.
That gets to the root of my problem. I don't blame Fritz for wanting to come up here and speak about these complaints, but I wanted to make a compliment. And one of the compliments is for Ms. Shelley and her new job, and another compliment is for Fritz and the program they recently had at the Cosmopolitan, honoring, among other people, Marion Orton, who has done a tremendous job for this city in regards to the telecommunications stuff. If Fritz wants to go ahead now with the complaints, fine. I wanted to make that compliment first. Thank you.
I would refer to Mr. Shepherd as the chair as to which thank you, Mr. Beams.
It's very kind of you, Mr.
Chairman.
Beasley.
Mr.
Mr. Venus, I think you should present what you would like for whatever little time. I know he's prepared some summaries or something, and I don't know.
I have a problem with what I've read tonight. This is the first I've seen of it, and I think that's the first you all have seen of his reply to my note. And actually, my complaint began last September, not in February 14th. It evidently got lost in the shuffle, but I've sent you all multiple copies of the complaints with reminders over the last 4 or 5 months. They have not been considered. So I would prefer to come back to you. I would prefer to come to you at a policy subcommittee meeting, because that's what we're talking about. And I'm going to run through real quickly and tell you the kinds of things that I see in this document that I referred to in my note to you yesterday and today, which agreed this would be a good starting point. But what we have here is the city framing my complaint. And I have already sent you a complaint over the last 3 or 4 months, which was not considered. So I prefer to start with my complaint and let the city respond to it. Do you understand what I mean? I'll make myself clear.
That certainly makes sense.
Okay. In other words, this is my complaint, and we're starting with a response from the city. I want to start with my complaint and then see a response from you all and the city, which I think is the way the complaint process is supposed to be set up.
That makes sense.
Okay. To go through here briefly, though, I'm talking 5 minutes, y'all, and what's left. We have a fundamental disconnect between the city council, which really is the decider about all of these issues. There is no connecting device on a monthly or even a yearly basis between the council and this board. This has always been a flawed process because they don't get to see things until there's a problem. There's no evaluation of the performance of the federal government channel by the council, I'm talking about, with your input. They recently had a very rigorous evaluation for the CAP, for your media, and we very seldom even see the folks on the education channel. And they're having a contract being written by the city, not by you folks, and you will get into it later on. I see that as a sea change in the way we've operated here in the city. And these are nuances, and again, they should be discussed at the policy subcommittee level before you all discuss them. We're going to talk some legal issues, technological issues, etc. For example, in this document, we talk about the channels, the 3 channels, and we talk about television. But we do not talk about telecommunications, which is your job. In 2003, when then Alderman Marr and Jordan led a very successful task force, we actually had an ad hoc subcommittee of the council, we went over all did not do a very good job of clarifying what the board real duties and responsibilities were, as opposed to the cities and as opposed to the councils. There's three in the mix. Now you folks have a very difficult job meeting once a month to do this. Actually, if you were being evaluated in a company, your attendance or in a schoolroom where I had been, you would be evaluated on your attendance, just like your kids are. You'll be evaluated on what a set level of criteria of what you're supposed to be doing. As we have it now, and this is not y'all's problem, over the last 10 years, we've never had a budget for telecommunications. As it's defined in the ordinance, we've never had an organizational chart of all of the telecommunications components. You're talking about an internet policy subcommittee tonight. That's not channels. What you have is a broad array of the new social media, which have been in the headlines all this last month. All of the other components of what are defined as telecommunications and its infrastructure in the city. So I'm not here complaining about what y'all do. I'm complaining about the structure, about the system. There is no advisory board over the manager of the center and the government channel, although there is an advisory board over the CAT channel or the Europe Media channel. And there is one written into the educational channel, but they're revising that, and the university's going to have their own channel. So we're going to have 3 paid channels, 2 of which do not have advisory boards that I know about, and I do not know what the complaint process is for them. They do a good job, not knocking that. Larry Foley has done a magnificent job. He took a piece of mud and turned it into a really award-winning channel. And I urge you to see the program that Ms. Nikita Reed produced that we saw last week. It's going to be shown on the Capitol. We're calling it your media channel. That's what.
Fayetteville Public Access Television.
Fayetteville Public Access Television. Anyway, we will have an opportunity to look at the history of the access channel. We do not have a history of the government channel, and we don't have one of the educational channel. I hope you do that. I'll get to the rest of it next month. If you all will give me an opportunity, as old business, I really hate to sit here for 2 hours, and I really applaud what you're saying about being in another room. But let's go back through it. My complaint, and request first, and then we can take his responses. I'll take them any way you want to do it, Mr. Bishop. And then we'll talk about the part that's incomplete, as I see it, in terms of reply to my complaint. Am I making sense? I have a letter that I've submitted 3 or 4 times over the last 4 or 5 months, and it's regarding these complaints. A similar complaint y'all talked about tonight. This board voted unanimously to have the CAT board meetings covered by the government channel. That has not been done. Now we have arguments about resources, etc. There are counter arguments about how that can be done, and shown on the government channel. Now we'll get into some of the other specifics of how you got to be here in the first place, and why I think it's time for the council itself to have an ad hoc subcommittee with a similar group of people from the city to look at some of the issues we're looking at. Thank you very much, unless you have some questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dugas. And I would like to echo some of the things that Mr. Dugas said. I mean, I certainly understand he has submitted documentation and he has submitted things that he wishes this board to consider And it has been a several-month process. And one of the things that I wanted to attempt to do, beginning with this meeting, is to help move this process along. Mr. Bemis has expressed frustration, understandably so, and we've had issues with quorums, as Mr. Shepard has said, we've had issues with weather, and we have new members on board, and I think it would be very helpful for everyone, from Mr. Bemis as an individual to every resident of Fayetteville and every member of the City Council and everyone in the city administration, to be able to continue to look at these issues and to get to a resolution. And not the least reason, which is that I think Mr. Bemis has shown a significant enthusiastic involvement in these issues, and it's only fair that he get some resolution to this after his continued support of this. My attempt, and what I distributed to him and to you as a report on his complaints, is how I would like to move forward in reporting to you on any complaint that we receive, that I receive as the manager of the City of Fayetteville Television Center and as the city administration's representative in the operations of the access channels. Because you as a board are tasked with facilitating dispute resolution. It is in Title III, Article 9 of the City Code. That is part of one of your duties as a board. Me, it's one of my duties as your city administration representative, is to keep you informed of those complaints and those disputes, and to also provide you with the city's perspective on those. So that is one part of the complaint process. A citizen bringing a complaint has their perspective, and then there's the different perspectives and different issues that have to be looked at whenever you as a board are attempting to facilitate a resolution to a dispute. That is what this document was intended to do, and that I believe that we did. This is not this was not intended to refute Mr. Bemis's complaint. This was not an attempt to dismiss it. It is merely an attempt to say this is the city's perspective regarding these issues based on what my understanding of the statutes are, the ordinances, and the policies that we operate under at this time. Now, that also means that in many cases, this board as a body, in your efforts to facilitate this resolution of disputes, can advise the city council that we advise the city council you need to do this. Because you can do that, and it's very appropriate for you to do that. So where we are on this, I wanted to clarify that as we go forward, and we have this, and to continue to try to support this whole process as we move forward.
So to understand, the complaint is there's not a formal complaint process.
That is one of Mr. Bemis's complaints, if I'm correct, is that there's not a formal documented complaint process in a lot of different areas of this that helps this whole thing along.
There is no document. For example, your administrative groups, which you folks haven't talked about yet, that's where you all make up your rules. You can have a meeting, separate meeting, and discuss these under your administrative group.
So
You do not have a policy that takes either the new government channel policy or the CAT contract through to a complaint and back. Those are untested. They're in there, but they're untested as yet. They've changed from what they were. So all I'm saying is they're untested and they haven't been reviewed by y'all.
And we're very conscious of that we didn't, I don't remember who was actually here to vote to pass those on the council. It was, again, 3-1. I was not ready to pass them. I thought we were discussing that night. So I apologize, Mr. Venus, for our being unable to carry out the duty of discussing those things at the table. And the reason we didn't have policy meetings in the last half of the year was that simply said we were finding it very difficult to get to record the meetings, and broadcast the meetings. And as the board we are, and what we're representing, what we are here to represent, I think is a group of people functioning in a small way inside a committee here, and absolutely being sure that we do no private discussion. We do not have private meetings. We talk to public officials on this business. We try to get public officials or interested citizens to come talk to us here in this open forum. And we have a committee meeting, and it's not broadcast. And who else can you expect to have their meetings broadcast? For some years it was the school board, and was having things that, and you would say, well, government, that should be our responsibility because the educational channel is there, and they have access to it about half of the hours it is there. But finally, they've begun to cover all school board meetings with that equipment. But at one point, we were being pressed to see that the government channel covered city school system meetings because they were failing to do it. So it's simply wrong for this body to meet, discuss policy without doing it. I would love to have a social gathering with you guys, but I'm not going to get into the policy there. We'll be about other subjects.
I would, if the board were so inclined, I'd be happy to have the subcommittee to look into drafting a formal complaint process, as Mr. Eastwood suggested in his memo to us this evening.
And what is our current complaint process?
I don't think there isn't.
Well, this right here is the procedure that was passed in the past few months.
Right, there's the channel manager, right?
There is a set policy, there's a set procedure for complaints regarding programming on Fayetteville government channel. There is a policy, there is a set procedure for complaints regarding programming and operations of the public access channel that goes through the public access operator or media. Not wishing to try to make a debate out of this subject, but this is a good illustration. We did receive a complaint. This is one of the other complaints that I needed to bring to your attention this evening. We did receive a complaint from a citizen regarding programming on the public access channel. The staff at Your Media followed this procedure to the letter. I was informed of the complaint, and in that process, the complainant contacted me directly, and I spoke with the complainant on the telephone directly. And with the understanding of having had the details of the complaint, because this process was followed, and I was able to have a discussion with the complainant, and she was able to express her complaint. She was able to have a conversation regarding it, and she was very satisfied with the outcome of our part of that issue, to the extent that I even asked her specifically, ma'am, would you like me to follow up in any way with you on this tomorrow, next week? And she said, no, thank you very much for your time. I understand where you are. So
That was not the communications director, correct? That conversation was with you.
that conversation was with me, since I, in this,
As the channel manager.
as a channel manager and as the television center manager. That process was followed, and it worked. And she was informed of all of her options regarding that. So we haven't received any complaints regarding programming. We have not received any formal complaints. I have not, regarding programming decisions on the government channel. So as Mr. Reed said, this process for the government channel has not been tried. It has not been proven. Now, as Mr. Pennington said, there is not a documented process for a resident or citizen or an individual to bring a complaint to this board regarding the operations of the television center. That is not documented anywhere. There is not a documented process for an individual to bring a complaint or a concern to this board to be considered about any other type of telecommunication issue in the city, whether that is for cable operator or internet service or anything that has to do with telecommunications in the city. That's not there. It's mentioned in the city code that it is one of the duties of the board, but it's the process would come under your administrative rules, and it's not documented in those. And I'm here to assist you in developing that any way I may be.
Quick discussion between yourself and the industry and the board, just real quickly. The first thing that comes to mind is we have the ability to put those slides up on the message board with that kind of information as to, you know, how to compensation manager or board. We have the ability to push that out through the website. What other venues, what other options do we have to communicate whatever process this is?
Well, I don't think I'm not sure it's communicating that, but when you look at this portion of this, a committee comprised of, that's bad English, the way comprised is used there, but anyway, a committee comprising the director of communication, another city department director, that's unstated, a selected member of the telecommunication advisory board, and a selected member of the city council will review the appeal. That's foregoing several steps. That previously, policy had always been that you came to this board and it was discussed. And then the option was for Mr. Venus or anybody else who's had a complaint over the years to take it to the council if there was that. That's clear.
That was the October
And
2010 that we had the same discussion.
do we have anything that tells us that process is not working?
Other than that, Mr. Venus has had some standing complaints regarding that the process doesn't exist, it's not documented, and as such,
I thought we were in a catch-22 here.
it sounds like we might be, but we've not received any complaints. The verbiage that Mr. Shepard just read is from the operating policies and procedures document of the federal government channel that was passed by city resolution, a resolution of the city council in October of 2010. So that process stands by resolution of the city council, and that's what we operate by today. Obviously, as a board, an advisory board of the city council, you are, it's well within your purview to contact the city council and say, we want to change this, or we feel like it should be changed. However, that is something that's there.
And while I understand what Mr. Venus is requesting, at the same time, if we've not run into an issue where this has caused an issue, I'm not sure that if it's not broke, why are we fixing it? I guess.
And from a pragmatic standpoint, the way we receive complaints 99% of the time is somebody picks up the phone and calls and says, I don't like X. I don't like that program. I don't like how you did that. That's 99% of how we receive our complaints. And they either call the number for public access, or they call me directly. The majority of them call the mayor's office directly, and then they're referred back to the proper entity to deal with. I know the director of communication, Lindsay Smith, has, in this last situation, she got involved with that complaint about public access, and she referred that individual back to me instead of bypassing the documented process of complaint. And so I feel like that process is working well. On the government channel, again, nobody has emailed me or called me or sent me a letter or in any way said, I don't like that you played that program at that point in time. I appreciate feedback of all kinds of that way, particularly like a good example is like tonight with Mr. Shepard talking about, can we move this program schedule, this proposed program schedule around to provide more emphasis to the city council meeting and a quicker turnaround. That is invaluable feedback. And I would rather get it that way than put something in place and then all of a sudden have somebody call and say, well, this is terrible, I'm filing a complaint. Okay, but people have the right to complain, and we want to have a process. We just haven't received it from the government channel side.
From our side, I think we've always had two options. It's either to take no action, which is an action in itself, or to recommend that somebody do something. Like if we were to be brought a complaint about some operation at the government channel, we might recommend writing a letter to Mr. Giesler saying, somebody brought us this complaint, do you think you might be able to change this? Or we could write a letter to the city council saying, a citizen brought us this complaint, we would like you to take action on this point. And, I mean, some of these that have been discussed over the past few months that we haven't taken any action on, maybe we should have taken a formal vote of, we want to take no action on this.
I also know that there's one part of this that's missing that I've seen, and if you'll look at the verbiage that's in that I pulled from the contract for the public access operator, it says that the response will provide a written response to the complainant detailing the investigation of their complaint and findings thereof. And I think that might be one part of this process that Mr. Pennington just described accurately that's not there. And is, where is it when, once you as a board makes a decision that we're going to do X, when and how do we communicate back to the person who's filed the complaint what it is that's going to happen in a very consistent way, and that we also maintain those as records so that they can be looked at sometime in the future. And I think that's also an important part of this. I think this is a very important thing to be looking at. As I said in my report, I encourage the board to continue to consider this. It might be within Mr. Shepherd's desire to try to put together a group, a subgroup to look at this issue, maybe to tweak it a little bit or develop some really good, solid issues, identify where the missing pieces are. I know from my personal involvement with this is that I have not ever actually, as your representative, I have not ever drafted a letter and communicated that or communicated the actions of the board in any formal way to someone who's filed a complaint. So I know that part is maybe not being executed well.
Well, see, the difference in this, what was passed, and as I say, I really expected tonight if it was voted and passed, that it would be the actual version that existed before, the one that our committee, policy committee worked on for a couple of years to revise, and these would be compared. The reason, as I said, we didn't do it in another committee meeting, it would have been an unrecorded meeting, as things stood at that time. So I did expect that we would discuss it and we would compare these things. This has, again, director of communication, city department, another city department director. One sewer man has to leave his office and come over to me. And then one member of this board, which historically it was before this whole board, and a selected member of the city council. I don't know who in this room or in this building, except the mayor, who I hope is home to bed, but who can select a city council member to be on a committee like this? See, I don't know who's going to have that power over the city council members.
Since the federal government channel is a division of the mayor's office, I would assume the mayor would be able to select.
Well, the government channel manager works under the director of communication, and it's hired by the
It says since the board is advisory body of the city council, any complaints regarding the performance of the board would most appropriately be directed to either the mayor's office or an alderman. I mean, and that's what we discussed before.
Yeah, that was the solution previously.
I guess the question
That appears to the council.
is this system functional? Do we have any reason to believe it's not?
Mr. Venus thinks that his complaints are not addressed appropriately by the board. I think that our inaction on some of his complaints are inaction in themselves.
I would agree with that. Mr. Venus, have any of these
not to take action on anything thus far.
This is a new process, so it has been tested. But the other one, I will say, Mr. Venus, there was no occasion when you went directly to council after you were dissatisfied here. Is that right? Let Mr. Venus go to the podium at this point, please. Mr.
Thank you. I thought I was going to let you guys off light tonight.
Well, we're looking at the.
You have not heard my complaint. That was what I said when I began. You heard a response that Mr. Geisler has made and what he interprets to be my complaint. He's got part of it, but he does not have my complaint. I gave you all 2 documents that were highlighted. Some of you may not have received them. Did you receive my documents that were highlighted?
Yes, I've received several.
And if not, I'll send them out again. Those gave very specific places within the policy and the contract that I think the city has overstepped its role. That's as nicely as I'm not accusing Mr. Geisler. I'm not accusing anybody. I'm saying that you folks are there to prevent the city from influencing the channels.
So my question to you,
And that's, incidentally, that's been taken out of the policy. But if you don't have that role, what is your role? And that's what I think the ad hoc committee could do. Now, if you have a specific question, regarding my complaint, I'll be happy to answer, but I prefer to do that next week when we're all a little fresher.
to be clear here, the complaint was brought forward, and we did not follow, we chose to not decide, which was action itself, as Mr. Pennington has said. And at that point, did you take it to the city council?
I'm sorry, would you rephrase that?
You had a complaint,
I have, yes.
and we have chosen to not make a decision on that, which is what Mr. Pennington said. Our action on the complaint is not to not take action. The question to you is, have you taken that complaint to the city council?
No, because I understood the process was that you folks would provide advice for me. Now, if that is your decision, that was done in September, you folks simply didn't respond. There was no decision made, and that leaves the complainant, when you go to the council, and say, well, what did the telecom board say? And I say nothing. And that's where you are, and that goes to what you were saying, Mr. Geisler, about not having a specific process for responding from you all to the complainant. When I go to a council member, I better have my ducks in a row. Otherwise, he's going to say, forget it. I wouldn't blame him. But let's get into that next week, and I'll go through there with you item by item. I will send each of you the same documents that I've sent for the last 4 or 5 months, and we weren't able to proceed to have a complete board meeting.
Well, Jim, I really wish you had gone to the council a few times because you're pretty persuasive, and that would have helped because there was people were mostly at a loss about what this body could do in several of those instances as far as actually fixing it. And as you say, that's before I got on the board, some of these things were going on. And
I had been before the council when you passed the policy, and their question was, Mr. Famous, why didn't the telecommunications board, what would they do if you were speaking, I believe, that night? Well, they asked me questions. Well, I think that's their responsibility to keep better tabs on you folks. You're supposed to give a yearly report. You're supposed to give a quarterly report. Mr. Geisler, Ms. Shelley, they have to give reports. You folks don't. Nobody evaluates what your board is doing in a very systematic way.
Out of curiosity, what ward or who is your council member? Who is your role?
I'm sorry, you don't have a mic, do you, Mr. Davis?
I'm sorry. What ward are you located in?
I'm not in the city anymore. I was when I filed these complaints a year ago.
So
And
served on this body,
Yes, I have.
what year was it?
And I've got a blog that I sent you, the web address. I'm preparing both a blog and a companion wiki. It's going to have all the old information, which you don't have anyplace else. Mr. Diesel operates with almost no documents that were left over by the previous administration. And most of what we're talking about tonight was initiated by the previous administration. So I find it very difficult to talk to a board that's had 10 chairs in 10 years, 5 chairs in the last 5 years. I don't know how many board members, and there aren't but 3 left from when I filed my complaint last year. So you can't do business that way, folks. You go out of business real quick if you try to do that anymore.
Well, somebody, it wasn't you, but somebody said we ought to pay people on this board to line up to get on it. But,
I think you got the most important job in town. You're talking about freedom of speech, and I'm a big, passionate believer in that, and I think that's the reason I'm up here. Y'all protect not the facilities that the city runs and administers. You protect the airways, the channels. The city does not own those. And that's one of the fundamental problems we have, that people think that the city somehow has control over the channel. They don't. Though that was given to you by the FCC and the Telecom Act of 1996. You folks know that better than I do. So we're going to have to get into that at the next meeting, I hope.
thank you, sir. Very much.
I think it might behoove us to look into the formal complaint process as a way to put things to rest. The complaint that was brought forth in September, which I think was overruled by the board's actions in recommending the city's draft policy to the board. I think that should have been enough to say no. I don't think the city's ever stepped its boundaries. If we need to put in place a formal process that says we read your complaint, we believe it has no merit, and we are going to take no action on it, or we are going to take some action and let you know what it is.
Or by the city council for
Something.
on this issue.
Do we need to create something to do?
I'd be happy to head that up.
Would you?
I would.
And I will
Be happy to
join the
Is that the issue?
Sure,
Gentlemen?
absolutely.
Let's see, do I have a motion to? Let's make a
So
motion.
moved. So moved.
Create this committee. And what are we calling it?
The complaint process subcommittee.
There you go.
Why don't we just call it the existing policy committee, because this is part of policy, instead of making it new. Would that work for you guys?
I want us to be specific.
Yeah, because that's a little,
Everybody in policy.
we don't write policies, so. that would
It's
be
an
a-
internal policy. I
No,
think
this board is the right policy.
The internal.
This is
Okay,
the
yeah,
job.
you can call it either way.
Yeah. This is the first time
Complaints and appeals.
that the city administration has written
Complaints and bills.
It was the committee, the council, and the people they appointed to this board that created.
This would merely be an internal policy, our telecommunication board procedural rules, not the telecom or the federal government channel rules. This would be how we handle a complaint that's brought to our board. And it wouldn't affect anything that's done by Mr. Giesler, by Shelley, by the government channel, or by your meeting, I'm sorry. It would be,
Well, let's set a date. You all agree that you want to leave?
March 17th is the next.
Next time you'll leave. You'd like to do it before then. I see. So what date in March, late February?
I don't even know what my schedule will be like the next month. Starting the job Monday,
February.
going to the mid-wall for example. Can we email, decide a time, and then notify the city clerk?
Yes, we'll have to do that together.
I think that would be a little more productive.
Okay. So we will do an email that will be available to the whole board, and same day Mr. Venus and Mr. Robert Hilton are two members of the public who request that they receive the email. The whole public has a right to every email that goes through any of these boards between individuals on the business of the board. Setting a time and a date of a meeting does not sound like action, but again, in the spirit of being a good example as a telecommunication board, then I think we should make it public to all of them.
Well, I don't know that I have their email addresses, but I'll certainly keep Fritz and Lindsley, you,
In
the
the
rest of
ones-
the board, in the loop.
And the ones where I sent you the,
They're listed there.
they're listed.
Oh, we can just highlight them after that. That's-
Shelley, as a cat manager, always needs the information on these meetings where she's expected to present.
I'll send it to everybody.
So, but,
I'll send out the initial kind of setup email, if that's all right.
well, the email that I sent with the, the agenda, like on the weekend, I had everybody added in. The one I didn't have that should have been on there was Anna Shelley because I didn't have her actual email. So I sent it to Heather, who's the office manager of the CAT, to see if it was in the CAT organization by that time. Okay, anything else? And that will be decided by email. Any other